Thank you for listening to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast, available on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Stitcher. Also, please follow Matt's Movie Reviews on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Reddit, Instagram, and MeWe. And of course, be sure to visit mattsmoviereviews.net for the latest reviews, top 10 lists, and more. Now, on to the show.
I haven't been sleeping well lately. 7, 6.
Are you getting outside at all?
4. I think I'm good here. 3.
It's not healthy.
2.
Falling up like that.
1. Just doing my video stuff. Feel free to like or subscribe. This has been Ken Barber's Long Life Tips. Ken Barber's Management Tips. Ken Barber's Divorce Dad Tips. Hello? Who is it? Some folks have commented that maybe my apartment is haunted.
You should for sure keep investigating.
Are there any weird bloodstains on the floor? Or blood-curdling screams in the hallway?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the only weird screams are mine. People are leaving comments saying it's all just a big hoax. It looks like I'm hiding something.
You did have a nervous breakdown.
Something happened.
When did you start drinking again?
It's really happening. Fine. None of it is fake. 1, 3, 2, 1.
That made me have the most horrifying nightmares. It was great.
Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 421. Releasing March 31 on Shudder is Night's End, a psychological horror that stars Gino Walker as an anxious shut-in whose attempts to exorcise the malevolent spirits from his haunted apartment takes a horrific turn. A tense and creepy film that tackles themes of mental health, technology addiction, and messing with dark forces. Night's End is also the latest film from director Jennifer Reeder, who I'm glad to say joins me now on the podcast. Jennifer, I thank you so very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Matt.
So it's really interesting. The screenplay from this is written by Brett Nevieux. He's a playwright in Chicago. From what I read, I think he said that originally he was looking to making a short out of the screenplay, and then they was like turned into a feature. How did you get involved with this screenplay? What was it about the story that Brett had that really appealed to you?
Yeah, so Brett and I had been, we've been friends for a long time, and I think he's a really, brilliant writer, and I've seen, so many of his plays, and that's mostly what's produced out of his writing, are plays. But he and I have been, but he's also been writing screenplays and scripts for the film for the screen, and I thought that, I kept thinking like we should try and find something to work on together. So we'd been having conversations about various kind of ideas and projects, and he would send me, scripts that he would write. He's a very fast writer. And some of them I liked, but I was like, I'm not sure if this is the right one, or, it's not the right timing or whatever. And so he sent me this script, and I really liked Ken Barber. I liked the idea of taking on a film that had an adult male lead. I mean, most of my other films have featured the experiences of girls and women, and in particular teenage girls, so that I just wanted to be able to say, like, I'm interested in all sorts of people. But this felt like an interesting challenge, and actually one that I had been looking for. I'd been looking for a script that had specifically an adult male as a lead. And I also, I liked the idea of making a chamber piece, really dealing with the confines of one location. And even, I do not think of this as a COVID piece, but certainly it was made during COVID. We shot it in the summer of 2021 when we were still, as we are now, really dealing with so many people through screens. And I think that this is going to become something that we do, for a long, long time, because there's been lots of, I think, kind of positive side effects that have come from, being able to sort of, communicate pretty effectively, across oceans as we are right now,
yes.
over screens. And, And what's not going away is is a kind of, interest in, amateur, social media, or what's not going away is anxiety and depression. We could go on and on. So, it just felt like it could be a piece that feels both timely and potentially timeless. And it felt like just a really good combination of things. So I said, yeah, I'm really interested, in making this. I mean, the funny thing is when he sent me the first draft or when I got, a draft of the script, and it wasn't necessarily the first draft, but it was all dialogue, he's a playwright. So it was like all dialogue. Right. So I just said, I love this. You're a great dialogue writer. I love the gist of this story, but we have to give Ken something to do. He lives by himself, but people who live by themselves still, do things during the day. So, Brett and I were able to kind of together, can collaborate as writers to get the script to where, to where it was when we started the first production day, so I helped kind of fill in some of the gaps around, the action sequences. I knew very well how I would, create his visual, the sort of the visual world, or Ken's world in that apartment. I knew exactly the color palette that I wanted to use. I knew exactly how I wanted to frame him, so it felt like, even though this is not a piece that I wrote, I feel like my hand is in this piece. And I hope that, my confirmed fans of the teenage girl films that I've made previously, will also love this film and see my heart and hand in it.
Gino Walker plays the role of Ken Barber, and some people might know him from Chicago PD, maybe from some other TV stuff as well. He's really terrific in the role. What I really love about the performance is he really portrays the kind of what can be the terror of isolation. Now, for some people, isolation, solitude could be something else, but for people who maybe not be the most stable mentally, it can be really a taxing, torturous thing. I mean, there's a reason why prisoners don't want to go into solitary confinement, right? I mean, when you're stuck with yourself, it can be a really bad thing. What's interesting about what happens with Ken in the film, he's got like a bit of a coping device. He counts backwards from 10, and then he says the words "forward progress." Was that something that was in the script already when you got it, or was that something that you guys added on a little bit later?
Yeah, that was not in the script when I got it. And, I had said to Brett that I really thought it would be, it would be fruitful to have Ken. I mean, Ken wasn't even really so much of a shut-in when Brett gave me the script to begin with. He definitely had moved into a new apartment. But he was not exactly, he didn't have the level of anxiety that he does in the final version. And, so Brett and I talked about a way to make it so that he sort of doesn't want to stay in the apartment, but he also kind of doesn't have the emotional capacity to leave the apartment. And that's also, that can provide kind of awkward humor, but also heartbreak. I mean, some of there's humor in this film, but that's not to say that we're making fun of any kind of these, any kind of disorders that keep people from, living their full life by any means.
Yes.
And this sort of idea of like the good and the bad of social distance and social anxiety, so to say. But I, in so many of my own films, I like to write in coping mechanisms for my characters, which might be kind of unexpected. And even though a kind of, count back from 10 with like forward progress, which is actually forward progress is something that later on his wife says to him. So we sort of have this idea that maybe, that's something that she has said to him multiple times. That's kind of her thing. And he's kind of taken it on for himself, and trying to believe it, I definitely think that, just at the very least, I'm certainly someone who, when I'm feeling kind of anxious, 5 full deep breaths, does help me.
I count backwards from 10. That's what
yeah. I mean, there's other, sometimes if I'm on a plane, my Catholic upbringing, brings me to a Hail Mary, a kind of a barrage of Hail Marys, even though, I'm a very, Reformed Catholic, or recovering Catholic, however you want to call it. But I mean, there's things that even I do that can kind of reset or refocus myself when I am, feeling destructively, anxious. So I wanted to build a kind of daily routine for Ken, that includes the kind of, pink antacid into his coffee, the soup making, the kind of inversion table, these things that we see him do every day that would be, for a chamber piece like this, it would mark time, it would mark the days, but it would also mark, like, for an audience, like, how well he was doing that day. So if it was a calmer count back from 10, or if it was the amount of the, pink antacid that went into his cup, I really thought that we could, without, like, I thought to myself, like, how can we get information to the audience about, like, the level of kind of Ken's anxiety from day to day without him expressing that verbally, because he's really trying to keep that information from his best friend Terry, and certainly from his ex-wife Kelsey. And I really wanted to avoid having him talk to himself, except for the counting backwards, which feels like that's really doing it out loud, feels like very much part of his process. I never wanted Ken to, have one of those tropey moments where he looks himself in the mirror and, I don't know, gives himself a pep talk or something. I just thought, like, we can do better than that. So all of those kind of, like, the daily routine that we are introduced to at the beginning of the film, and then we kind of see it go through different phases, where it kind of, he gets worse and then he kind of gets better again, and then it ends, and that's worse, and that's even worse, at the end. So that was an interesting, kind of challenge to take, Brett's material and being able to kind of, add information to it, as another writer.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by 80s Tees. 80s Tees is an online retailer of licensed t-shirts and pop culture gear from your favorite movies, TV shows, cartoons, video games, comic books, and musicians. Celebrate your inner 80s nerd and click on the link in the show notes below to get the raddest retro t-shirts delivered to your door. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by Loot Crate. Founded in 2012, Loot Crate is the worldwide leader in fan subscription boxes. Loot Crate partners with industry leaders in entertainment, gaming, sports, and pop culture to deliver monthly themed crates, produce interactive experiences in digital content, and film original video productions. No matter what you geek out about, Loot Crate has a subscription box for you. To get your very own exclusive collectibles, apparel, and gear delivered to your door, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is also brought to you by Vudu. Watch the latest movies and TV shows anytime, anywhere. No subscriptions, no contract. Enjoy stunning quality in up to 4K ultra high definition at home, and download and watch on your mobile device as well. To rent and buy from over 100,000 titles or watch thousands of movies free with Vudu Movies on us, be sure to click on the link in the show notes below. Now, back to the show. Something that's really interesting about the film is that you just mentioned then there isn't that moment where he kind of looks in the mirror and has that kind of moment. He purges his stuff outward onto YouTube. He's a YouTuber. He has all these kind of live different channels, and anyone who works YouTube knows you should never spread out your niche. Just stick to one, but he's gone all over the place. But he's more using that as a way of purging out his feelings. And it comes down to the thing of what I call the evil of screen time. Screen time is a concept that a lot of people associate with kids. They don't really think about the impact that it has on adults as well. It's insidious in its addiction. It has negativity on the brain even when we're adult as well. And what I find really interesting about how you tackle it in your movie, I know that you are a big fan of Videodrome. It's a movie that you watch once a year. What do you think watching Videodrome now, even after making this film, does that film say in a very kind of pathetic kind of way of what screen time, of what the insidious nature of screen time and people watching screens is today? And do you think that your love of that film, what Cronenberg did in that film, does that influence in any type of way how you kind of approach that kind of theme in your movie?
Oh God, that's such a good question. And yeah, I mean, I love that you you brought up, Videodrome, which was also really inspiring for my section in VHS 94.
Yes.
Which was, right, which is also a Shudder original that came out this past October. I am shamelessly a consumer of lots of lots of video content,
me too.
Through a tiny screen.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it is also a kind of like a calming tick. There's on Instagram, my most recent thing is I love to watch like the talking husky dogs that say like, I love you or something. I find that like, I'm like, oh, that made me feel better. Now I can go on with my day or something like this. I have no problem admitting that. But I'm also, but also as a filmmaker and a storyteller, I also, there are accounts that I follow that are, where there are people who just are like, it is like a diary, like it's every post is kind of Dear Diary. And it's just watching, a kind of unraveling personal chaos. And I have, deep sympathy for some of those, owners of those accounts. But I feel fascinated, like as a storyteller and someone who likes to write really complicated characters. I mean, part of it is research as a filmmaker. I mean, even the sense of like aspect ratio, watching like who of the YouTubers or the TikTokers or the Instagrammers are like going vertical or going horizontal. I mean, I really get into this sort of sense of who wants it to be perceived as cinema or who wants it to be perceived as like Instagram 4:3, which for me goes back to like analog VHS, and that goes back to Videodrome. I remember a young filmmaker that I was kind of mentoring said, that she was going to shoot her project. She was shooting at 16:9, but she was going to crop it 4:3. And I was like, oh, like VHS. And she said, no, like Instagram, that was like, so like that in that moment, the kind of, that really kind of like underground behind the screen world of Videodrome and the drug that is Videodrome, in that the signal is the signal is the sensation or the signal is the sedative. I mean, I think even that actually gets said in, I wrote that in for VHS 94, but that's happening in a kind of reverse way for Ken too. We're watching somebody do exactly what you should never do. Not only just like, stick to your topic, but, he's sort of using it for the, 4 subscribers that he has to be heard, literally to be heard and to be seen, And I think that that so much of what we as evolving humans need to be healthy mentally on a daily basis is to feel valid. We need to feel validated, and that means being seen and heard. And in a time of even pre-COVID, if you are isolated or self-isolating, if you are isolated, forced isolation or self-isolating or something, in between, it's, that sense of being seen and heard just vanishes. And so, he's in that place. And the connection, making this film where we had to build chemistry between characters that literally we shot everybody separately, so we built that chemistry in post. We didn't bring in actors to act against each other. I mean, except for Kate and Michael, who were obviously in the same frame.
Yeah.
Everybody else had to were just incredible actors, who were acting against the script supervisor who was like feeding them lines, which I think helped on some level create these what does feel like, a distance. So when we get to, the exorcism, and I won't spoil things, but there is that sense of everybody being watching, watching something horrible happen, and they have no control over it, because literally everybody is totally, is very, very, very far away from each other. And that's that's a world that some people choose and some people, create for themselves. But at the end of the day is not, in my opinion, something that is all that good for one's personal, human evolution.
Final question. A note that I wrote down when I was watching this film was evil gone viral. It's really interesting. One of your favorite films is that you watch once a year is Videodrome. One of my favorite films I watch once a year is The Exorcist. I love that movie. When that film came out, there was a lot of kind of warnings from pastors and preachers and priests. Billy Graham famously said that the devil lives in that film. If you watch that film, you leave yourself open to perception of evil forces. And it's really interesting the use of technology and spiritual and religious practice over the last couple of years. I'm a practicing Catholic. And during COVID, I watched Catholic ceremonies, mass, etc., through screens, etc. There's actually a evangelical pastor in America. He does exorcisms via Skype. I don't know if you noticed. What's his name?
Wow.
I totally forgot what his name was. Anyway, Bob Larson, his name was. He does that through on Skype. What do you think of the theme of, you were saying before you watch the video with the puppies or the dogs and it calms you down. There's an effect on it. Do you think if people watch stuff that does portray things that are evil, that maybe perhaps there could be a seedling or thing that could affect someone on the other end? Or do you think that's more just kind of like, the mental state of the viewer as opposed to the content of what they're viewing?
Yeah, I think I definitely, I actually think that that people, I think that audience, like genre films and specifically, horror are getting just more and more and more popular. But I think for the opposite, I think that there are people who, and like, very religious people, very pious people, very, very ethical people who still, as film consumers, like to watch, sort of very, very kind of evil films. And I think it's, that there is a there's a need to acknowledge darkness in the world, that there is darkness in the world. I don't think it helps anybody to deny that there's a darkness in the world, and that whether or not you believe in the devil, that there's devilish things that are done by mortals all the time. We're certainly we witness that on a daily basis all around the world. So I think that it's for me, I feel like sometimes for like watching a very scary movie, or a movie that really is about sort of evil forces can then, when the movie's over, it's like a different kind of a cleansing. You get to return to the world where huskies talk and people love each other, and you get to be the person who's made different choices for your life, who's made different choices for your life, so I think it's and even like something that I again specifically because you were talking about this, growing up Catholic, there's so many really profoundly cinematic images in Catholicism, yes, that I find so extraordinary and so moving. And I was hearing someone talk about they had met Sissy Spacek, and she was talking about her experience doing Carrie. And she said that during Carrie, she really looked at lots and lots of beautiful Renaissance, and like images that were based on church imagery, to sort of like think about who some of the poses and gestures that she would take, that she would sort of take on. And I think it can have the opposite effect. We definitely thought that there was a ghost on set when we were shooting, there were definitely some strange things that happened, and we all had this sense like, did we conjure that? Are we making a scary movie and we've conjured something? No, I think consuming, consuming content that can feel antithetical to sort of who we are at our core, can amplify our core sometimes, or I think that more often than not, it amplifies our core. Rather than to kind of infiltrate it in a nefarious way.
Well, look, Night's End, it's such a fascinating movie. It's such great to watch a horror film that makes me want to ask questions like this. And so great to talk to you, Jennifer, about the movie. Everyone out there listening, March 31 on Shudder, Night's End, the latest film directed by Jennifer Reeder. Jennifer, I thank you so very much for your time today. And hopefully we can talk again in the future. It's been a pleasure talking to you today.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was great talking to you too.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content. Also, if you would like to request a review and support my work, please join my Patreon via the link in the description below.